Hi, Pookies. May was a month full of particular characters. A lot of love and hate swirled around this tiny noggin as I pondered questions such as why is there so much crime in crime fiction? Is polyamory okay when sexy tennis players hot? And life is? Now, to address the dolled up Victorian child in the attic, I'm at my parents' house for uni break, and there was no good lighting indoors, and outside is the center of a village, so it's so noisy. So, this is what we're going to get. It's like if the woman in the attic slayed, which is very relevant to what I read this month, which I'll be telling you about shortly, because, oh yeah, these are my May delicacies. This is everything I read, I watched, and listened to in the month of May. Okay. I finally finished Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, and Wuthering Heights is one of my favorite novels of all time, but this was just as good. I don't think it was better, but it was just as well crafted. I need to have a glass of Shardy with the Bronte sisters ASAP. When discussing classics, people rightly talk about themes and historic context, but I thought I'd give you a little rundown of the premise because discussing this book with people in my life, not a lot of people know what the bulk of it is actually about. So we follow Jane, who was orphaned and entrusted into the care of her uncle, who then dies himself. But upon his deathbed, he makes his wife promise that she will raise Jane as one of her own. Alas, Jane is raised in a household full of ritual abuse at the hands of her male cousin. The novel picks up when she finally retaliates. This retaliation, though, leads to her confinement in a room. And this is when Bronte really begins to blur the lines between reality and fantasy, reality and the paranormal, as Jane has this terror-induced mental break and has these visions which become very important later on. Jane is then effectively disowned and sent to get an education at the Lowood Institute, an orphan asylum. And little Janie's kind of excited about this. She loves her books. She loves birds. Unfortunately, there is no rest for the destitute Victorian child, and the school is more of a workhouse. The poor living conditions lead to it being infested with disease and infection, including that which afflicts my queen and Jane's homoerotic best girlfriendship, Helen Burns. God, I love you, Helen. Two Bronte sisters actually perished as girls in institutes like this from neglect, and this was a particularly charged and harrowing part. Jane, however, is healthy and she is left to her own devices all day, every day, and she roams the forests for the first time, experiences freedom, and kind of blossoms as a young woman. And this section is so full of fairy tale, magical imagery. Jane's often throughout the novel referred to as elven, as a fairy or a pixie, or, depending on people's moods, kind of goblin-esque. The bulk of the novel, the most well-known parts, however, take place at Thornfield Hall, where Jane begins working as a governess for the ward of the enigmatic Mr. Rochester. Mr. Rochester, get your grubby mitts off of her. Why I order. Mr. Rochester is old and handsome and exhibits loser-ish behavior, though he had me giggling a few times. But that's a sign of personal weakness. During the night, in this grand old manor, Jane begins to hear ghoulish screams and footsteps. Though everyone convinces her, that's just our servant Grace. It's all cool. She's just like that. Jane, though, must tread carefully as a woman with no title, broke, ugly, no family, no bitches. This novel is a feat for so many reasons. It was initially published under the male pseudonym Carabel, with the byline an autobiography, which is very true to the story as it pushes at the power of language and expression and education for self-determination. Jane is this incredibly strong, morally righteous woman, but time and time again, she suffers due to these patriarchs, this system which she, as a destitute woman, will never truly have power. Another huge part of this novel is the handling of the British Empire and settler colonialism at a time when abolition was such a huge discussion. This is an interesting piece of literature that can be read into a number of different ways, and I've read a lot of different articles. I want to say more, but I don't want to spoil this like I did for my coworker accidentally. He didn't know I almost just said it. Anyway, despite being very religiously heavy, it got some flack when released as being anti Christian, which is how you know it's going to be a good read. Also, the first novel ever to be narrated by a child, first person narrated by a child, which is cool that it was a young girl. So, yeah, this is going to be a long section, huh? Well, read it if you want to. I liked it. Then, in a move that surprised everyone, I read two Lisa Jewell novels. Um, I need to preface this review by saying I don't think crime fiction is for me. Plot is not my priority. I rarely care for it, but I was gardening and I needed something to listen to, so I put on the audiobook of None of This Is True, which everyone had been raving about as super twisty and dark. A posh girl boss podcaster begins a series on a random woman she meets in a restaurant, and soon this woman's traumatic life story begins to infringe upon her life. Lisa Jewell is really adept at capturing specific types of people through all of these minute details. She really paints a vivid picture of these two women of vastly different social classes at different points in their lives, but then it's like, what do you do with that? Conform to stereotypes might be the answer. I found the use of, how do I put this, systemic issues as plot devices, plot twists to be kind of in poor taste. And maybe I'm being a special snowflake, but with everything happening, especially in Australia at the moment with domestic violence, to use it as sort of a ooh moment just left a sour taste in my mouth. And maybe as a litfic and classics reader primarily, I was expecting too much nuance or attention to be given to issues like that. I must say the audio production was so good. It was like a radio play. I loved all the different voices and the sounds. And as the novel is primarily told through dialogue through a podcast, it was obviously very fitting. I know there are wider discussions around the ethics of crime fiction and true crime, and I just don't know if it's a genre I'll be revisiting anytime soon. Me when I lie, because I then read Lisa Jewell's other novel, The Family Upstairs, to see if it was a fluke, and spoiler alert, it wasn't. This one's about a adopted woman who turns 25 and inherits a house in London worth millions. It's the same house, though, where her birth family committed ritual cult suicide. So we jump around time and learn about the cult's formation that led to all of their deaths. This novel just solidified that Lisa Jewell's writing is not for me. Without the dialogue to fall back on, which I think she does dialogue well, the exposition was quite clunky and juvenile, I thought, and really stilted the pace. I have this really bad tendency of rewriting novels I find uninteresting in my head as I'm reading them, which kind of messed up the ending in this one because that's not right. And it's like, do I have to do all the work around here? And I also have to say that if you present me with an aging twink with a cat hoarding problem, I'm going to root for him no matter how weird and sadistic he is. Sorry, I have to. So I guess read this if you enjoy House, London, more teen pregnancy. Okay. Continuing my mission to spread negativity, I read Andre Asselman's latest novella, The Gentleman from Peru, which really should have been called The Gentleman from Peru, because this book stunk. A group of young professional Americans are holidaying in Italy. No, it's not a horror. I know that's a chilling sentence. Well, kind of is. Not for that reason, though. When they come across this mysterious old Peruvian man at their resort who seems to know everything about them and can heal their wounds with a touch. Sounds intriguing, see? Unfortunately, one too many times now, Andre Asselman has painted my face white, given me a big red nose and size 11s, and made me boo-boo the fool. Because I am historically a Call Me By Your Name defender. I think it is a beautiful coming-of-age novel about the messiness of teenage experiences coming into yourself. It explores Elio's mental health, the effect of the relationship on his mental health, in much more depth than the film. And I think because a book portrays a certain relationship, it doesn't necessarily mean it condones it, right? And so I would shout from the rooftops until I read the sequel to Call Me By Your Name, Find Me, which follows Elio's dad, who begins a relationship with a much younger woman. And that didn't even have the salt and the sun to distract me and cloud my judgment. Now, imagine my face as I'm reading The Gentleman from Peru and slowly begin to realize that this novella is about misaligned lifetimes. It's about time as an obstacle standing in the way of love, of romance, of soulmates. If only age wasn't a factor, don't you agree? Don't you agree that old man should be with young, sexy lady? Wait, what was that last part? Asserman can wrap this narrative in as much classical history and summer citrus as he likes. I truly don't think it disguises the sour self-defensiveness at the heart of this. To me, it was as subtle as a 14-year-old girl who's being bullied by Mandy, so she goes home, logs onto AO3, and makes the villain in her Harry Potter fanfiction named Mandy with an I. Is Andre Asserman the pretentious people's ebony raven darkness dementia raven way? What am I talking about? In all seriousness, I still hold those beliefs about critical thinking and interpretation, but I also acknowledge how difficult it can be to pinpoint why something makes you uncomfortable in literary fiction like this, where the crux is so caught up in metaphor and allegory. And all I know now is that thrice an Asserman protagonist has been entangled in a romance that is framed as undeniable, inevitable, and the burden of judgment has been placed squarely on the reader. I'm tired. These characters may live in a fantasy land called Italy, where all that matters above everything else is a shared connection, two souls meeting. But I live in this world where that kind of rhetoric is used all the time to validate grooming and abet abuse. I don't think the majority, especially if they haven't read his other books, will have this interpretation or go down this line of thought, but that's what informed my reading, and I didn't enjoy it. I couldn't enjoy it. And I told my coworker who recommended it to me that if it went down that path, that's the end of him. So count your days, Daniel. Onto some joy and love, well, grief and lies. A novel that might become one of my favorite reads of this year, Brat. Yes, Charlie XCX named her new album after this. Duh. This is a layered meta literary fic debut from London writer Gabriel Smith about a man named Gabriel who is a writer in London and begins to fall apart at the seams after the death of his father. And I absolutely flew through this. Gabriel must sort through his deceased parents' house in order to get it ready for sale, and he keeps making discoveries that contradict his knowledge of his parents. A manuscript that implies a secret family but changes with every read. A script about a sitcom episode that changes with every watch. Oh, and his skin is coming off. In sheets. Yeah. Why do people die? When people die, does everything we know become memory and not fact? And how can we know if we ever really knew someone? What about who they were for everyone, all the different versions of them, and all the possibilities of who they could have been? Do they die too? Please leave clear and definitive answers in the chat. Thank you. There is a need, an urgency, a hunger to this writing that I found so incredibly exciting and refreshing. The idea of language and stories creating alternate timelines, parallel universes, self-contained worlds is obviously right up my alley. It was very compelling, and I don't think this is going to be for everyone. It gets a little bit experimental. The writing style is very particular. It's also very funny. It's goofy, so you know that's my kind of humor. I was laughing out loud. But, you know, if you're a language lover and wrangler and sometimes feel as though identity is a costume, this might be for you. I think it's going to be one of the best novels of the year. I wanted to expand my wrap-up videos from just books on TikTok to YouTube, big, more media. Wow, how eloquent. But I think I've just talked about books for a while, so I might just quickly go through the films and music I've been into. If you want me to speak more on these in the future, I can. I just don't want to yap too much. I'm just trying to ease everyone into it. And also, I only watched 3 films in May, which is crazy for me because I'm a going to the cinema every week kind of girl. And I did go to the cinema 3 times, but it was to see the same film 3 times. Yeah, I saw Challenges 3 times. I actually don't want to talk about it. That's all I have to say. Luca Guadagnino is my day one. He is Pookie. Like, that's my guy. That's my silly little Italian guy. So I watched Challenges 3 times. I watched the Jane Eyre film adaptation. Mia Wasikowska slays. Everything else mediocre. Why would you cut out the scene where Mr. Rochester dresses up as the Traveler? I mean, obviously probably wouldn't fly nowadays. You could change it a little. Anyway, he gets in disguise to trick her into telling her how she feels about him. That is so silly, goofy hijinks. And that's what we need in period films. Everyone takes it so seriously. Anyway, Jane Eyre, a bit lackluster. I'll put my Letterboxd rating up there. And then I watched, how could I forget, one of the greatest cinematic masterpieces of the 21st century, Mr. Bean's Holiday. Yeah, it was a 5-star watch. Duh. To me, it really drove home the ancient Chinese proverb, when the man from the frontier lost his horse, how could he have known it was a blessing in disguise? Much to consider. I was at that point, my tweaking microphone cut out, so you get me in bed. Hey, what more did I have to talk about? Oh, music. I actually realized as I was filming that Spotify had cut me off from premium and a bunch of my playlists were messed up. Yes, I sometimes forget to pay my bills. Yes, I sometimes forget to keep money in my account. Whatever. But I'll just recreate my May playlist and link it below. I've been very into Jessica Pratt's new album, particularly Life Is. I cannot stop listening to that song. If you're a fan of Faye Webster and her new album, I think you'll enjoy this. I actually saw her perform in Brussels last week and it was incredible. Her voice is just insane. And I've been listening to a lot of Joyce Heath. One of my favorite songs of all time is by Joyce Heath and her album was recently remastered. So that's been really exciting to listen to a lot more of her music. Of course, Faye Webster, and I've been getting into a little bit of Leve as well, which has been cool. I think I prefer watching Leve perform, like videos of her, than purely listening to it. She just has such a fun stage presence and I love the orchestra and watching them all interact. Hopefully one day I'll get to see her in concert. And I think that was pretty much it. I said thank you for watching and then, I think I ran around the attic for a while. There's no audio, so I can't remember what I was saying, but I was showing you all the Naked Lady tapestries in the attic. Oh, and then I was talking about the treasures I found. I found lots of treasures. There's hundreds of years worth of stuff in that attic, and I was going to ask if there are any fashion history oomphs on here who know what this little bag could be I found in a drawer. It has Deux Médailles Expo Paris, I'm pretty sure 1878, so the World Fair in Paris in 1878. But I wonder what the little bag is used for, if it's part of a ceremony or that was the prize was awarded for the creation of the bag. We're very stumped, my mum and I, so if anyone has any knowledge, what a tangent. I think that was pretty much all. Thank you for watching. Thanks for everyone who's come over from TikTok. Thank you to all the new people who have joined. Thank you, and okay, bye.